So hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. And as people turn up, I will obviously let them in. So if you come into an easy cross-legged position, or indeed, if you want to come into Siddhasana, Siddhyonasana, we're coming directly into a meditation position this evening. And we're delving right in there because tonight's session is very much based around the 7th chakra, Sahasrara. So last week we dealt with the third eye center situated around the forehead, linked with intuition and the pineal gland. We're now looking at the 7th chakra that is situated around the top of the head, so close to the fontanelle, which solidifies at about 2 years of age. So as babies, toddlers, essentially. So ensure that you have your sit bones grounded and rooted into a secure base. So you may want to bring those up a little bit so you can allow for the knees to relax away from hip points. So indeed, if you need to use lots of height, please feel free to do so. So you've got this sense of grounding down and this upward energy from the root, from the perineum, from Muladhara chakra, that first chakra, all the way up through the other 6 chakras situated around the pelvis, around the navel, so Manipura, around the heart space, around the throat, around the third eye, and upward into the crown of the head. So I'd like you to think about the energy rising from the root as you draw up through the vertebra. So you're imagining yourself as tall as you can possibly be. So it's quite a composed position. The shoulders are relaxed away from the ears. When you do that, can you relax the shoulders by setting that intention? Can you release the jaw by simply setting that intention? Can you move upwardly as though you tilt the chin in slightly, so slight Jaladhara Bandha, growing up through the crown of the head. So you imagine that there's this lovely long line and space in between the vertebrae, all the way up to the atlas joint and the top of the head. Now, at the top of the head, this energy center can be visualized as a 1,000-leafed lotus. So this is connected with our consciousness, sense of omnipresence, awareness, and unity with the divine. So a bit of an intense use of language there, perhaps. The properties involve stillness, emptiness, presence, intelligence, awareness, knowledge, understanding, and grace. So we're going to be considering that element of the body by rolling onto and creating that opportunity for feedback in the crown of the head. And we can do that without coming into the full Sahasrara, the full headstand. That's absolutely achievable within our means. And we'll be working with this upward sense of energy through dancer. So coming into that meditation posture, after all of Hatha Yoga is about preparing the body for meditation. Coming into stillness, acknowledging how this upright asana feels within your body. And you can just gaze down in front of you at the mat or close your eyes, whatever feels more comfortable. And as you begin to acknowledge the breath, as you inhale through the nostrils and exhale through the nostrils, notice how that feels within your body, within your torso, within your chest, within the back line of your body, within your belly. So you may want to begin to set that intention to release around the belly and soften this region so it can expand on the inhalation. And then on the exhalation, maybe that belly draws inwards. Inhaling, expanding and softening around the abdominal region. Exhaling with a sense of drawing inwards. So you can imagine or envisage that this process is much like a squeeze box or an accordion. And as you open and allow for the air to rush in, there's a sense of expansion, not just around the belly, but around the ribcage. And on the exhalation, your squeeze box is drawn inwards and the air is exhaled out through the nostrils. So although we're not making the same kind of amazing sound that we would with an accordion or squeeze box, there is that same sense of pressure as the air is drawn in and out of the region of the lungs. And keep going with that sense of inhalation and exhalation. And as you breathe more slowly, as you inhale deeper and exhale deeper, just potentially just notice how you feel softening around the eyes, softening around the face, softening around the jaw, and releasing into this space. So when we work with Sahasrara, crown chakra, it's all about meditation. Meditation can seem like a very obscure, regimented tool sometimes, but it's really just about becoming more present and aware to the processes within our body. So it's a sense of quietening down. So it's perhaps a big ask to come into this straight off at the beginning of a practice. So just notice how that feels within your body. Notice if you're raring to move, which is quite common, quite normal, especially if we start off with movement within the practice. So we're going to bring the arms up overhead on inhalation now. Inhaling and drawing the gaze up towards the ceiling, allowing for the hands to come together, maybe a little bit of a back bend. And we're going to exhale to rotate to the left side, coming into a spiraling action from the base of the spine up towards the crown of the head. So we're very much aware of this helix of energy, maybe it's Ida and Pingala, spiraling around the vertebra of the spine, reaching up into the crown of the head. Inhaling and holding this rotation, but feeling into the potential for movement. And exhaling, is there some space that arises? As you exhale, the diaphragm draws upwards, there's more space to move. In a very anatomical sense, there will be more space. Inhaling, expanding around the belly. Exhaling, gently gazing at the floor to the side of the body. And indeed, if you want to move that arm further around, sometimes it can be chance where the hand lends itself to. You move the hand further back to explore maybe some more rotation. Maybe the gaze now comes behind the body. And on the next inhalation, we're going to release upwardly through the midline and exhale to the other side, allowing for that spiraling to come about as you reach the hands back down, positioning wherever you need to. Inhaling to find that length from the base, from the root, all the way up to the crown of the head. Exhaling to rotate. Now within these rotations of the spine, if you've had supper, even if it was a while ago, like me, it may be the case that digestion kind of gets a little bit of an oomph. Maybe it's a rumbling of the stomach, maybe a little burp. Just acknowledge any of that. Inhaling to allow for the belly to billow, and exhale to find rotation. Again, we can explore bringing the hand further back, moving into a deeper rotation. Breathing here. Noticing what you notice. Maybe you can feel it in the neck, maybe you can feel it around the back line of the shoulder blades. Maybe it's somewhere else that you feel the sensation. And then on the next inhalation, we're going to lift up through the arms and come into a forward fold. And that can be anywhere. You can bring the hands onto the ground, or you can come down onto the elbows, breathing into the back line of the body. And indeed, if you like to bring the forehead down, that can be really lovely to get that sense of feedback. Keeping and maintaining the sit bones releasing down into your ledge or into the floor. Breathing here. And on your next inhalation, we're going to creep the hands back towards the center and drop the hands behind the buttocks, lifting up through the heart space, coming into a little back bend, like a mini camel, mini Ustrasana, drawing the shoulder blades together, but keeping the chin tucked in. And if you really want to explore how the neck feels today, you can indeed bring the chin up towards the ceiling, but just acknowledge when it begins to start to crunch around the back of the neck, And drop the chin forwards. And then creep the hands towards the front. So we're going to swap the legs round now, coming into the opposing cross, and creep the hands forwards, either coming onto your elbows or drawing the forehead down to the ground and reaching out in front. Wherever it feels good to move into today. And it may be the case that you don't feel any sensation moving up through the hips, and that's okay. We don't need to push deeply into sensation within our asana, especially not at the beginning of a practice. And then creep the hands back through the midline. We're going to bring the feet together to come into Baddha Konasana. The position of the heels can either be closer into the pelvis or further away. And if you move your feet further away, there's more space for the pelvis to come into an anterior tilt. We come into a little forward fold. Now don't press too deeply into the external rotation around the hips here, especially if you're hypermobile. And you can sink down, either bring the hands in front of the feet or rest them onto the knees. And explore your forward fold here. Breathing. And really paying attention to that base and the energy in between the crown. It's that lovely long line of energy. And if we think about these energy centers, it's about awakening them. Just a system of understanding energy. A system like any other. And then drawing the knees in towards the midline, removing the props. We're going to come into a semi-supine position with the knees hip width apart. Coming into a pelvic tilt. So allow for the spine to settle. I always find that my body has to kind of readjust as I come down to the ground. With your attention down in the pelvic bowl, we're going to begin to roll to and fro along the back of the pelvis. Rolling and slushing that imagined water within that bowl down towards the feet and slushing the water up towards the face. So you've got this lovely rolling action. And if it's tricky to move into the pelvic tilt, you can think about the shape that you're cultivating around the lumbar. So maybe you're rolling into a little bridge and then flattening the lumbar against the floor. And it changes the intention of the movement somewhat, but it can be helpful to move into it in that way first. Rocking and rolling, feeling into the relationship between the pelvis and the spine. It's a really important one. And maybe bring your fingers to the front of the hip points here and push down into our iliopsoas. So that may feel like a gristly area that's very much about our ability to walk for this action that we come into when we're walking. And just notice how tight that feels, or indeed how loose and relaxed that feels. We're going to move the knees in towards Apanasana to come into a little flexion. Really important before we come into Setu Bandhasana. So bring the feet down, hip width apart. We're going to unfurl, so a little bit of a pelvic tilt here, but we're unfurling each vertebra off the ground, drawing the knees away from the midline of the body. And you can take this movement as high as you need to before rolling back down. Let's do this 3 times, feeling into those vertebrae as you release into bridge, Setu Bandhasana, and rolling back down again. Now the next time we come up into this action, we can clasp the hands underneath the buttocks, bring the shoulder blades, so you've got this little ledge to push into Setu Bandhasana, and you'll notice that the neck feels nice and long, pressing down through the knees. There's a sense of support as you open up the back of the neck. And can you feel into the crown of your head? Now I'm really pressing down through the legs here, so there's a sense of strengthening. Now there's another option here. If you've got a brick handy, and if you need to come out to get hold of your brick, please feel free to do so. So I've got a fairly solid cork brick here. If you get hold of your brick and come back into Setu Bandhasana, can you bring the back of your pelvis to rest on the brick? Now you'll notice there is a change now, because you can release the pelvis. There's not so much need for the iliopsoas, that region that you feel into here, to tighten. So it changes this position quite a bit. Can you release through that line of the body? And indeed, if you feel comfortable in this position, maybe you want to come onto the higher option of the brick, changing how much movement is taking place within the upper spine and between the shoulder blades. And you may be feeling that. Can you release through that front line of the body? This is going to help us for Natranjasana, dancer, just to access that sense of lengthening. So when we have tight quads and we're tight around the front of the hips, the hip flexors, it can be difficult to access dancer. Releasing into this space to remove your brick, take the hips a little bit higher, drop the brick and roll down through all of those vertebrae, one by one. Now we're going to take the right leg out and to thread the needle, waking up the feet and draw the knees in towards the midline. So we've got this lovely hip opener, bit of prep here. It's not helpful to call it a hip opener. We don't necessarily want to open the hips. So be careful with the language that we use. Rolling from side to side. And from this position, you can straighten out the lower leg to come into eye of the needle. And if you're hypermobile, just keep the knee slightly bent. So don't lock and lengthen any ligaments too much. Flaring up through the feet. How does the eye of the needle feel? And then bending that lower leg. Releasing the legs down. And just for a moment, let's bring the arms out to the side and drop the legs over to the left, keeping the shoulder blades grounded. And then gazing over to the right hand. How does the neck feel today? To rotate over to that side. Breathing here. And then bringing the gaze back through the center, rolling the legs upwards and dropping the right foot down. So we're going to bring the left leg into this, external rotation of the hip, drawing the knees in towards the chest, flaring through the feet, rocking from side to side. Again, acknowledging the movement from the hips up into the jaw, that lovely intimate link, that relationship between tight hips and tight jaw. And then straightening the leg out into eye of the needle. Spreading through the feet, base of the big toe. How does that change things in your body? Before bending the knee and taking the hands out to the side into a T shape. We're going to drop the legs over to the other side, just moving props if necessary. Keeping the shoulder blades grounded, allowing for the knees to splay out. Coming into Jatara Parivriti or supine rotation, gazing over to the left side, so the left finger. Now, where do you feel it in this position? I'm getting a sense of the hip crease, but also a lovely sense of rotation around the back line of the body. And that may vary from person to person, depending on what you've been doing today and how your body is. Bringing the gaze back through the center, rolling the legs in towards the midline and dropping the feet. Now from this position, we're going to take the knees in towards happy baby. So whether you want to bring the hands to the back of the knees, remember the knees are splaying out towards the side of the torso and the hands come to the base of the feet, Ananda Balasana, rocking from to and fro, maybe playing with a little figure of 8 within the hips. How is it in your happy baby today? And if you feel like you want to take the roll a little bit further, can you fold the left leg in and roll over and draw the right foot down to the ground? And then rolling to the other side, can you bend the right leg in to bring the left foot down to the ground? A little bit of play, a little bit of somatic exploration. This is really lovely to see, to feel. It's not something you can overthink. To move in between. There we go. And then as you come back into center, we're going to bring the knees in towards the midline and rock and roll along the spine. I've needed to roll a lot today, I have to say. Rolling to and fro 3 times. How does your spine feel? Before we come into an easy seated position, but we're coming into Ardha Matsyendrasana. So we're quite familiar with Ardha Matsyendrasana. It's half Lord of the Fishes. If you need some padding underneath the sit bones, please feel free to do so. We're aiming for this full contact with the ground, so we're feeling symmetrical. The foot is fully grounded. And when we forget to pay attention to the sense of grounding, it can be the case that the foot rolls off the floor. Now, if it's not possible for the foot to ground, bring the foot in front of the hip point. Again, using some padding. From Ardha Matsyendrasana, acknowledging the base, moving up through the spine to the crown of the head, we're going to spiral into that upper leg. A closed twist, wrapping the hand around the outside of the knee, or pivoting with a little bit of feedback if you want to create extra rotation. Gazing down behind you. So this strengthens the rotation that we came into initially. Again, you can bring that hand further around the back. Breathing here. Acknowledging again, Ida and Pingala nadis spiraling up through the spine like a DNA helix, rising up to the crown of the head. Breathing here. On your next inhalation, we're going to spiral around into an easy open rotation. And you can relax the hand to the inside seam of the leg, or wrap it around the knee, or bring the elbow into pivot. Again, acknowledging whether the hand at the back wants to move, gazing around the back of you. Make sure the foot is grounded, including the big toe. Breathing here. And on the next inhalation, we're going to spiral around to the midline, pivot onto the sit bones and swap the legs over. Wherever the foot was, ensure that it's grounded. Make that adjustment to your potential Ardha Matsyendrasana. Rooting up from sit bones, lifting up through the spine, we're going to spiral it into our closed twist, finding the hands wherever they need to be, whether wrapped around the knee or creating a little hinge to press into the outer knee. Breathing into that space. And you'll notice there's some restriction within the breath here as you breathe into the abdomen. Your next inhalation, coming through the midline and coming into your open twist, using whatever arm position works for you, guiding the hand behind the buttocks, moving it behind you even further if necessary. Breathing here. And it should feel like you can be fairly open around the collarbone and two shoulders. Standing or seated in quite a proud position. And then inhaling through the center. This time we're going to swivel the top leg on top of the lower leg. Bring the arms out in front, swivel the legs over. Lovely little hip mobilizer. Side to side. And then as we bring the legs forwards, we're going to pivot onto our sit bones into Navasana, rooting up through the spine, base of the spine, sit bones grounded, lifting up through the crown of the head, and working with Navasana. Inhale, straighten the knees. Exhale, pulsing the knees in towards the chest. Inhale, exhale, nice and long in the spine. Again, feeling that length, that pulling, that rope. And you can come into your Ujjayi breath here, sounding the ocean to guide you in Navasana. This is when the breath becomes really key, as it helps us. And then from our Navasana, let's spiral the legs over to the side, swivel onto all fours, come into that lovely all four position, spreading through the hands nice and wide, flattening the tops of the feet, and paying attention to where the knees are positioned. Now, as we come into all fours, pay attention to your body, listen in here, pay attention to the pelvis and its position space, so that sense of proprioception. Now we're going to feel into a lengthening process through tailbone all the way up through the spine to the crown of the head. From that position, we're going to bend the elbows and allow for flexion to take place to come into our scared cat. We're then going to inhale into neutral, bending elbows, coming into your spinal extension, your cow. Feel into what your body needs here, moving on the breath, nice and slow. Wherever you can sense your body, maybe there's more than one place talking to you here. Keeping the gaze down at the mat, tucking the chin in to keep the neck nice and long. Try not to lead with the chin here. And then as you come back through your neutral, acknowledge how the lumbar feels as we extend through the right arm and the left knee to come into bird dog, releasing across the line of the body, keeping the gaze down to the imagined in between the hands position when we were in all fours. Breathing and lengthening through middle finger and base of big toe. Breathing, of course. If you hold your breath, come back to all fours. Gathering around the front of the abdomen to change the position of the pelvis, particularly if we're collapsing around the lumbar here. And then bring those limbs back into center, extend through the other side. Alternate hand to foot, moving outwards, utilizing the breath and feeling into that lovely long line across the midline of the body. Indeed, if you need to come into child's pose at any point, feel free to do so. And then drawing the limbs back in, come to the other side, this time constantly moving and not holding this position as we exhale, lengthening through the exhale as we tuck knee to elbow. Inhale, lengthen outwards, exhale, elbow to knee. Inhale and exhale. And then feeling the hand and the knee meeting the ground, again coming to the other side. Reaching. Now this is quite a different movement if you do it very slowly compared to if you do it quickly. Because it's really about noticing all of the different flowing movements up through the spine as you come into flexion and extension. It's about relationship. We do this quickly, we override the sensations available to us to listen to our bodies. And then releasing back down into your all fours position. And bring the hips down into child's pose, extending the arms out to the side, dropping the forehead down, or bringing the ground up to the forehead if necessary with a block. Breathing here. Now from this position, we're going to slide the arms forwards, lifting pelvis up towards the ceiling, coming into puppy, so the hips are directly over knees. Releasing into your puppy, and resting the side of the head down to the mat, and then swapping the head over to the other side. From this position, we will explore and play with wrapping around the arms to bring the elbows in, to transition down into prone, allowing for the legs to slide away, and adjusting the arms if you need to come into Sphinx. So the elbows are directly under the shoulders. And we're opening up around the thoracic, the midsection of the spine. Now, if your lumbar is twinging, you want to think about protecting that region by tucking the tailbone under, tucking the chin in here. Release the hips from side to side to ensure that the body is relaxed. And as you draw the arms in towards you, you may feel like you can pulse the body through. So is there this movement available as you pulse? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Just notice. Lovely. Now from this position, we'll take the arms under the shoulders, tucking the chin in and lifting up into cobra. And you may want to come into a cobra, utilizing the arms, keep the shoulder blades together, shoulders down, and unfurl the spine as you draw the breastbone forwards, tucking the chin in, hands come to the ground to lift back into your child's pose, dropping the forehead down or finding the ground to bring the forehead onto something for feedback. From this position, we're going to tuck the toes under. How are the toes to release down into the ground today? The fingers come out to the outer reaches of the mat. And of course, as we come up into downward dog, release the crown of the head down towards the mat. Don't feel like you have to straighten the knees directly. Feel into that lovely long length of the spine when you bend the knees before extending out. Make any adjustments that you need to, but ensure that there's space for the neck to rotate. So you're looking under the left armpit and the right armpit. Again, acknowledging that lovely long line from the base, the perineum, maybe the pelvic floor, all the way up to the crown of the head. Lovely. From our downward dog, we're going to scoop the right leg up towards the ceiling, three-legged dog, and draw the knee in towards the nose. Can you hover that on the exhalation before bringing the foot in between the hands? We come into a high lunge, lengthening through the iliopsoas. And then as we drop the knee down, we're going to come into our low lunge, inhaling and lifting up through the upper body. You've got this apana energy moving down and this udana energy moving upwards, feeling into this expanse above you so you can open the arms to relax the shoulders. And then we're going to draw the hands down to the side of the foot, rock back into a half hangman, feeling into that hamstring energy, and rock forwards and rock backwards. Allowing for the torso to unfurl over the leg. We draw ourselves back, tuck the toes under, lift the back knee, and taking the weight into the hands, draw that foot back into our downward dog. Breathing here. Releasing the left leg up towards the ceiling, bending the knee, exhaling, hold the knee towards the nose before scooping the foot into that frame of the hands. Coming into your high lunge, kicking out through the heel, and then dropping that back knee, flattening the back foot, come into your low lunge. With the knee directly over the heel, lifting up into your crescent moon, feeling into that openness around the shoulders, widening the expanse of the hands like you're holding onto a beach ball. So you can come into a slight spinal extension. And then dropping the hands down by the foot, we're going to rock down into half hangman. Breathing into that lower leg energy. Extending through into our low lunge. And rocking onto the heel, half hangman. And as we roll forwards, we're going to bring that back knee off the ground into a high lunge. And bring the weight into the hands to come back into your downward dog. Breathing here. Explore how this feels. Before we drop the knees and come into a kneeling position. Now, sinking the hips back onto the feet, how does it feel to kneel? How is this in your body? Is there anything going on in your knees? We're going to get hold of a bolster if you have one and pop it behind us to come into our Ustrasana, which is going to be good prep for our dancer. So there's many different ways in, and we've been practicing Ustrasana from various positions. Let's explore the position that involves bolster behind us. If you don't have a bolster, you can use anything that's a bit like a ledge. And we're going to think about lengthening through the quads and the front of the hips to come into Ustrasana from this position with the chin tucked in. Breathing here. Now, by all means, if your bolster's lopsided, you'll find yourself feeling like you're on the wonk. Sure, that's not the case. Prep your bolster if you need to. Coming into the position, lifting up through the hips. And you come into this supported Ustrasana shape. Releasing and coming into a tiny little child's pose. Breathing into the back line of the body. Opening up around this region of the spine. Now the next position, we're coming into high kneeling. And I would like you to think about opening through the upper spine, the thoracic, the midsection, and releasing the hips forwards. So we're lengthening along the front line of the body, keeping the chin tucked in. You can get the tongue tucked in as well. And bring the hands to the back of the pelvis. drawing the shoulder blades together, tucking the chin in. Now, if this is available to you, you may want to explore bringing the hands onto the heels to come into Ustrasana, drawing the chin in. And only if you haven't had any head injury or head intervention, maybe explore bringing the head back. But as I said, we've been working with this for a few weeks, so work within the limits of how you feel. And then to come up and out, draw ourselves up and curl into our flexion, into our child's pose. Really important to open and release around the lower back. Now, if your forehead meets the ground, that's great. Otherwise, let's bring something underneath the forehead so we can make contact. Bringing a block or a brick so the forehead meets the base of the brick. And if your shoulders feel happy, bring them together and clasp the hands behind the back. We're coming into rabbit or hare. Now, if the shoulders aren't happy to come into this position, bring them down in front of you to come into a tripod position with the arms. So wherever you're happy to be, we're going to roll up onto the crown of the head, finding a sense of feedback as the arms drop away from the body, and then roll back. We're going to do that 3 times, paying attention to the pressure moving from forehead to crown of the head. How does it feel? One more time, I'm just going to take a look at you. What does it feel like to bring pressure into that region? Does it feel tender? Does it feel achy? Does it feel good? And then roll yourself back and remove the brick or the block. Now we're going to do a little bit of Sahasrara exploration, but not feeling like you have to come into a headstand unless you are doing that in a daily practice. So noticing how you feel, we're going to bring the hands into a little position where the fingers are interlocked. And the prep that we've just done in rabbit is very helpful to come into this position. So the hands come in front of you and you're exploring the arms wrapping around so the shoulders are quite close into one another. And we bring the head down. So the forehead won't necessarily meet the ground, but we'll be rolling into the back. So if you've got a ponytail, it might be in the way, but the position is very much with the hands protecting like a little barrier here. So if you can do that in an upright position, you'll get a sense of feeling of how this will be as you come down onto the floor. Now, the common mistake is to get the hands in the wrong position. We're feeling the flat area of the top of the head. So can you get that ledge? And can you get that sense of support? Now, when you found that sense of support, please be cautious around heads. You know that head is a thing for you to be cautious around. We're going to extend up through the legs so you're coming into slightly more pressure here. Now, wrapping the shoulders closer in, feeling into the weight moving down through the head. And you'll really want to feel like your neck is perfectly secure and fine. If the neck feels vulnerable, you may want to move the position of the hands and the neck. So the neck, if I was looking at you in space, would be this lovely long line. And if you feel comfortable, you can explore lifting one leg up and the other leg up. Noticing how that changes things. And I always find when drawing weight into the crown of the head, it feels very juicy, fairly tender, fairly dense, very necessary. If there's anything that's particularly, any strong sensations that feel sharp, please come out. And if you know you need to be careful with the head, without naming names, please do be careful. So of course you can explore lifting the legs up. If you practice Sahasrara, tuck the knees in towards the abdomen, don't kick the legs up by all means. And you can come into a comfortable, controlled position in your Sahasrara. But it's not about coming into Sahasrara, it's about exploring the weight moving down into the crown of the head. And then to finish, we're going to come into a little child's pose with the forehead resting into the ground. From our child's pose, we're going to tuck the toes under, make sure there's enough space along the mat, and draw ourselves up into downward dog, releasing down into the neck and rotating the head from side to side. Now, depending on how your energy is, we're going to move forwards into Uttanasana forward fold. If you feel like you have the energy for that today, spread through the fingers, bend the elbows and kick the buttocks to bunny hop 3 times. Optional. And then find the feet, pad the feet to the front of the mat. Uttanasana. We do that fairly quickly, give yourself time. Bend the knees, sink the torso over the thighs, and drape the hands around the shoulders, the elbows, hanging the head freely. And as we bend the knees, we're going to unfurl each vertebra as we come up into a standing position. And I'm going to change the alignment of the computer. As you come into Tadasana, adjust as you need. Lift up through the toes, rocking onto heels, and then lifting up heels to come onto toes. And hopefully you can see me okay. So from our Tadasana, at the front of the mat, we're going to step back through the left leg into an easy step, so it's not extending backwards too much. The pelvis is facing forwards within headlands, coming into a Virabhadrasana 1. Heel can either come off the ground or the heel swivels in about 45 degrees or thereabouts. Lifting up through the arms, so that sense of that wide beach ball, so you're nice and strong in the lower limbs. And this upward energy, Udana energy, through the upper body. And you can feel like the shoulder blades are draping over something. Imagine someone's bringing a hand to that midsection of the back, opening up into a spinal extension movement. And then drawing ourselves forwards with the arms reaching, we're going to step forwards into Tadasana, lifting up onto the toes. So you're nice and long from armpit down to the little toe. And then swinging the arms back, we're going to take ourselves into Virabhadrasana 1 on the other side, either bringing the heel off the ground or swiveling it to the inner line, but the pelvis is fixed into a forward position, lifting up through those arms. So you're nice and strong in the legs, lifting upwardly through the body, through the torso, opening up the arms as though you're holding a beach ball or one of those Pilates balls or a pregnancy ball, and draping the shoulder blades over imagined hand behind shoulder blades. Coming into a lovely spine extension, you can really explore that before scooping yourself back into Tadasana. Now, it may be the case that you want to drape the torso forwards to come into flexion. We're going to pick up our brick and place at the front of the mat. So we need our bricks. Now, if you want to use a wall for this balance, feel free to do so. We're going to come on left foot onto the brick and simply swing the right side. This is prep for Natarajanasana. Dancer, bringing the hands to the fronts of the hip points. How much can you swing the leg back and forwards? So this is really good preparatory action for dancer. Now, it may be the case that you feel like the leg is lengthening through this action. We're aiming for a sense of release through the iliopsoas. I swear I say iliopsoas far too much when teaching. And just notice whether any crunching is taking place into the lumbar. Okay, now swinging to and fro, we're going to take that foot back, come to the other side, right foot onto your brick. Because I'm using a foam brick, it's got my footprint very much in that space. Now we're going to rock the leg backwards and forwards. And by all means, if you don't have a brick, you could use a really fat book. War and Peace will do it. If anyone has that lying around. I have a copy, but it's masked up with masking tape. I don't think it would take my weight very well. Rocking to and fro, releasing through the iliopsoas, and take that foot back and notice how it feels. Now from this position, you can either use a brick or not use a brick. So we're going to bring the left foot onto the brick here, swing, and then bend the knee and take hold of the ankle, not so much the foot. Now, this is quite an ask on strong quads. There's a sense of lengthening here. And with the left arm, we're going to begin to kick out the leg. I have a screen in the way, so I'm going to bend my arm. We're kicking out through the leg and moving into dancer, Natarandasana, allowing for a hinging action to take place, but feeling into the grounding of the leg, the upward energy through the upper body. And you don't need to take this into an extreme. It could just be a gentle pivot. Be very aware of the quad, the lower back, and explore how that is in your body before coming back to the bent knee and bring yourself back down. If you're working with your left foot, making contact with the brick, come to the right, swinging backwards and forwards, tucking that ankle into the hand. And this always feels very strong on the quad. Drawing the right hand forwards and extending into Natarandasana. Dancer, the upward energy, Udana energy through the upper body, and Apana contact with that lower leg. Drawing the knee back in. Watch your balance. My balance isn't so great today. And then coming back down into your Tadasana, draping yourself back over some bent knees, opening up the spine, releasing forwards. Lovely. And from this position here, coming up onto tippy toes, bending the knees, dropping yourself down onto your sit bones, and explore coming into Navasana boat pose. The lovely long line between the base, the sit bones, the crown of the head. And if you want to explore further, I'll move the bolster out of the way, tuck the knees in, curve the spine, and roll back. Bring the feet back down into your semi-supine. Bring that shins into parallel. We're going to open the arms out to the side and drop the knees into Jatara Parivriti. Keeping the shoulder blades down, and you can bring the knees up higher towards the chest or allow them to splay out to the sides, wherever feels right for you today, before gazing over to the opposing hand. Finishing off that lovely S shape. Bring the gaze back up through center, rolling the knees in towards the midline, and then rolling them over to the other side, gazing over to the left. Bring the gaze back through the midline, rolling up into your midline, and take your knees in towards the chest to make a tiny little ball. And we're going to open ourselves out like a single organism, navel radiation, out into a starfish shavasana, making any adjustments that you need. If you need to bend the knees and bring the bolster underneath the knees to protect the lumbar, please feel free to do so. So you pop the bolster underneath the knees. If you need to bring some padding underneath the head, and I really recommend this, even if you think you don't need it, to pop it underneath the head. You can try a stronger angle to create a little cushion, tucking the chin in, finding this amazing support. It changes a lot to bring some padding underneath the head. Allowing for the limbs to roll out to the sides. And I'll come up to talk you through your relaxation. Coming into Shavasana, corpse pose, final relaxation, making any adjustments that you need to. So when we work with Sahasrara, that 7th chakra, 1,000-petaled lotus, we are working with the 8 limbs, the last 3 limbs of the 8 limbs of Patanjali. And those 8 limbs expand over all that yoga is. One of those limbs is asana. One of those limbs is pranayama. The first 2 limbs are the yamas and the niyamas, the ethics, You then move beyond asana and pranayama to pratyahara, which is sense withdrawal. But when we work with Sahasrara, that we're then moving to the last 3 limbs towards meditation. So we're lying down on our backs in a comfortable shavasana that works for you. With those last 3 limbs, we have dharana, concentration, which is the means to meditation. So you may be concentrating on a candle flame, you may be concentrating on the breath, you may be concentrating on sensation. They are the tools or the means towards meditation. We then move to the 7th limb, which is deep meditation, you beyond the concentration element. And then the final limb, samadhi, means absorption into the divine or union, where the boundaries simply dissolve. So those last 3 limbs take us from beholding to becoming to being. And as I mentioned earlier, Hatha Yoga is the practice of postures that's said to be designed for the purpose of preparing the body for meditation. And the beauty of that process as we move through those elements is that the inner commentator of the sports game of your life becomes blessedly silent. So that quote's from Anadea Judith, who works a lot with the chakras within yoga therapy. So within your shavasana tonight, simply observe how you are in the space. And there may be not the connection between the observed and the observer. You may have moved beyond that, perhaps. So when we're working with these elements, it can become quite abstract. It's very much about philosophy, about consciousness. So whatever resonates with you, but let anything that doesn't make any sense drop away. And moving to a sense of Satchit Ananda, of truth, consciousness, and bliss. And within this energy center around the top of the head, we can think about that area as being deficient at times. This area is developed actually towards the ages of 26, 27. You know, we consider development as being rather quicker than that, but we're actually talking about the mid to late 20s to when these areas develop. So when the area is deficient, you move towards materialism. You can be disconnected and cynical. If that area is excessive, you can be overly intellectual, spiritually addicted, very spaciness, apologies, I can speak. And then when that region is within a balanced place, the sense of realization, of grace, enlightenment, and bliss. As ever, this is a system of working with energy. Just notice how you feel as you lie here in Shavasana. Notice whether the crown of the head feels different. That sense of massaging was created with some of the asana tonight. And if you're not already doing so, I invite you to close your eyes. If your awareness is very much at the front of the face, forward thinking, it often is. See if you can draw your attention back into the midsection of the skull, as we did with Ajna Chakra, the pineal gland, sinking the attention to the middle section of the head. And then see if you can drop the attention back to the back reaches of the skull. Dropping your attention back into the dorsal region of the body, the back line. And take that attention up towards the top or the crown of the head. The top or the crown of the head. And then lifting that attention, maybe move beyond the space above the crown of the head. The space above the crown of the head. And then dropping the awareness down through the crown of the head, down through the center point of the skull, down through the throat, down through the heart space, around the chest, the back line of the shoulder blades meeting together, down through the torso, past the navel, down into the groin, to the pelvic bowl, and then all the way down past the perineum, down through the legs, and out through the base of the feet. Allow for that awareness to go back into the fingers and toes, creating some movement. And at the end of the following sound, I invite you to roll over onto either side of your body in a fetal position, creating some padding with the arm. And again, at the end of the following sound, I invite you to ground down through the hands and lift up into an easy cross-legged position, Siddhasana or Siddhyonasana, whatever feels more comfortable to you. And you can choose to use some support, either a meditation cushion or the bolster or a block. Feel those sit bones rooted down into the earth, into the ground, and that sense of elongation up through the spine, into the crown of the head, sitting tall. We're going to close the practice by inhaling, lifting the arms up overhead with a sense of release around the shoulders. And exhale, drawing the hands through the midline, tracking your drishti as you bring the hands into the heart space, and then finding a fold, bowing down in front of you. Namaste. Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to see you. Excuse